So this is a very important video. This is from a creator named Gavryn. I haven't watched this yet, and I've been really wanting to watch this. I'm going to link the video right now. You guys make sure to leave a like on this video. Make sure to come in here, give it some watch time. Hell, go in there now, put the video playing on mute or something so that it's giving it watch time while we're watching it here on the channel. Okay? This is From Garage to Glory, the story of grinding gear games by a guy called Gavryn. And I've been very curious about the background of this developer. And the reasoning is I never really played the original Path of Exile all that much, so I don't have that much experience with the game. But as you guys know, we've done a lot of like watching of interviews and stuff like that from the developers of head of Path of Exile 2. And I really like what these developers have to say, so I want to get a better idea of what this team has been like. Because I think this might end up becoming one of my favorite development studios because of the way that they've been approaching the development of Path of Exile 2. Because unlike a lot of these studios that started coming up with excuses, if you guys remember when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, a lot of studios instantly came out, hey, this is not a new standard. We can't do this, okay? This is unachievable. It can't be done, except for the fact that Larian Studios, this small independent team, did it. But it can't be done. Nobody else can do it. This is crazy shenanigans. Nobody should try to do it. And, you know, everybody started crying foul because Larian Studios decided to make something completely insane. And these developers appear to be taking the complete different approach. Like often I've seen Jonathan say in his interviews, like, you know, we have to pay attention to what's going on in the industry and to see which new standards are being created so that we can meet up to those standards and potentially exceed them, which I think is a very, very important attitude to have when you're a development studio, of not just resting on your laurels and chilling out. Is like you have to be always aiming for bigger and greater things. And I feel like they've done something really cool with Path of Exile 2. So let's see what this is all about.
So basically, the player plays a character who's been exiled from their homeland. They've committed a crime, which varies depending on their character class, and have been exiled to the world of Rurikhan, which is a very hostile, forbidding continent. Everything, ranging from the monsters to the environment to other players, are out to get them here, and they have to forge their way in this world. But we stress, it isn't about the player saving the world. In this case, they're trying to save themselves, and to gain tools that allow them to survive against the wilderness.
Greetings gamers, I'm Gav. This is the story of grinding gear games and the creation of their amazing title, Path of Exile. From Chris Wilson's garage to where they are today, GGG's consistent communication and openness with the community regarding their development set a new standard in the space. A connection.
That's another thing that I've greatly praised them for on the release of the game was their communication. Because oftentimes a lot of companies, whenever they release an online game and there's problems with the servers, they'll do one post on Twitter and that'll be it. And it's like, guys, there's problems with the servers. We're figuring it out. And then 2 hours later, we're like, and then there's queues and everybody's like, grinding your games was like on top of it the whole time, being like, hey guys, we found a problem. Give us 30 to fix it. And then 30 minutes later, we're like, oh, we found another problem. Give us a little bit more time. They were constantly updating us, which is one of the things that I felt was, you know, it made the whole situation way better. And they solved everything without 2.5 hours. If you already had a Grinding Gear Games account, you didn't have a GGG account, then you had to wait like 4 hours before they were able to solve everything. And since then, it's been pretty much smooth sailing with the occasional lag spike on the servers, which is to be expected, but mostly it's been smooth sailing if you just want to play the game.
Between the player and the developer that's unfortunately been lost over time in many genres and titles. They do right by the fans of their game and are constantly delivering fantastic content. Officially announced in 2010, Path of Exile has continued growing its dedicated player base year over year ever since. In this video, I'll start from the very beginning when the studio and game were first being established, all the way to the successful launch of their game in 2013. I won't be going over every patch or how the game has evolved over the years, but perhaps in a future video we can take a look at the patch-by-patch progression of the game. I'll list off what I think are the top 3 major contributors to Path of Exile's long-term success. And at the end of the video, we'll take a brief look at how they're bringing over a decade of experience into their highly anticipated sequel, Path of Exile 2, which is set to release in early access later this year. Alright, let's venture all the way back to the beginning and dive in. At the age of 5 in the mid-1980s, a young Chris Wilson stared longingly at the new Amiga 500 computer system that his parents had brought home. He was
The Amiga 500. I never had one, but I had a friend of mine who had one, and I had a cousin of mine who had one. My dad, rather than buying an Amiga, he bought an Amstrad, which had the DOS operating system. And it was not as good as the Amiga because the Amiga had really good soundboards, way better soundboards than your PC speakers, which absolutely sucked. So I was always jealous of my friends who had the Amiga because they had better games, and it was just like way better for gaming than the PC. So yeah, I was very, very jealous.
Still a bit young, and his parents were apprehensive about allowing Chris to.
You are that old? Yes. Yes, I am. Like, listen, this was, to give you guys an idea, this was the music that they were making in the Amiga, okay? Like, let me just show you guys. Let me just show you guys something real quick. So, let me give you, let's see, which one was it? So this is on the Amiga. Let me show you guys. I'm super passionate about this. The music of this game is friggin', it was insane. I still love the music of this game today. And let me show you what it sounded like on PC. Let's choose the same track. It is the which one is this one? The Ultimate Challenge. God damn it. I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. So I want you to listen. We have here the Amiga version of the music and the PC version of the music, okay? So like, that sounds really cool. Now listen to it on the PC. That sounds so lame, dude. That sounds so lame. Are you kidding me? What a joke. It's like the Jurassic Park theme when then you have the one on the flute, right? It's that bad. So it's like, bro, the Amiga was, that's the thing. Like, people who weren't around back then just don't understand. But the sound of the Amiga was amazing. And then you would listen to something on the PC and you'd be like, this is terrible. What happened? Who made this mistake?
To use it just yet. Keeping the computer away from him, however, only sparked his curiosity further. By the age of 7, Chris had already started to program on that very same Amiga 500.
Oh yeah, that's something that I will tell to potential parents. Trying to keep your children away from computers is the worst thing you can do. That's a terrible idea.
System. His obsession had begun. Fast forward to Chris's teen years spent at Avondale College, a secondary school located in his hometown of Auckland, New Zealand.
Let's get to the history of the company. Chris.
Yes.
Jonathan. How and when did you guys first meet?
So, at high school, there was this computer in the library that had a copy of Quick Basic installed on it. And that was kind of because they didn't have it in the computer labs, of course, because why would you do that? So I'd go there in the library at lunchtime to do some programming, and this is when I was like 16 or so. And so one time there's this kid on the computer, and I'm like, hey, kind of, you know, so so I introduced myself when we were chatting. He was a few years younger than me, and so we started talking about coding, and kept in touch pretty well as I went to university. Then he went a few years later, and we were good friends, and eventually decided that once we get out of university, we're going to go make a game. We weren't sure what it was yet, and
I think we had a vague idea.
we had ideas, but it was
Inspiration for that game at all?
Yeah, a little bit.
well, we both played a lot of D2 together. So, you know, by the time Jonathan had finished university, we were pretty set on this idea that everyone was terrible at making action RPGs, and we could actually make a good one, which is hubris and crazy when you're just a couple of...
But you're right. I cannot express the amount of regret I have over the fact that I chose to play Diablo 3 over Path of Exile. I cannot express how much regret I have in me. I should have played Path of Exile instead.
Random guys in your very early 20s. I think you were like 20 years old
Yeah, 20.
at the time. We hadn't had commercial game development experience. We were just hobbyists. Like, way less qualified than most of the people we hire now.
Jonathan and Chris were fast friends with a shared dream of making a game together. This was much more preferable to them than making a career out of the mundane software industry at the time. Through their love of Diablo 2, Jonathan and Chris would find the next piece of their puzzle by pure happenstance. They found their art director, Eric Olafsson.
Eric, how and when did you join this ragtag couple of guys?
Well, so first of all, I actually met Chris in a Diablo 2 strategy forum. So that would be maybe around year 2000 or so. So that was back in the day. It was harder to find out the best builds and so on. You didn't have streamers and everything back then. But then a few years after that...
Interestingly enough, I think that this was actually a much healthier time for video games due to the fact that you wouldn't know all of the things that are game-breaking from the get-go without going too far out of your way. There was still a lot more joy of discovery in what you are doing. So, for instance, what I've been doing with this warrior build that I'm going to be playing today is like I didn't look at anything. The idea why I wanted to do, what's it called again, totems, is because at one point when I was in my mercenary, I was like, well, I have a free skill slot. I don't know what to put in there. Let me try this totem thing. Maybe it can distract monsters so that they'll stay in position while I lob my grenades. And I always thought that totems are lame. That was my understanding. I'm like, these totems are going to be lame. I'm going to hate it. And then I saw my character like stomp the ground and a big rock comes out. It's like, and I was like, totems are cool as shit. I want to make a character all about totems. There's an ascendancy that's all about totems. I'm making a warrior about totems. And I just started like theory crafting shit from there. That's it. And the joy of discovering whether or not the build is viable by just experimenting with different skills is a ton of fun. I find that very fun. And it's interesting because a lot of people kept telling me like, oh, you shouldn't do that. I mean, totems are actually good, but you shouldn't do this skill. You shouldn't do that skill. It's like, no, you don't understand. The fun part of it is discovering whether or not these things work.
I got a random message where Chris was saying that him and Jonathan were thinking about or like wanted to make a Diablo-like game, and
Diablo-like?
that sounded amazing, I thought. So.
Now, for context, you were living in Sweden at the time,
Oh
right?
yeah, so
I wonder when this interview was. So they were already using the term Diablo-like back then. They were already using this term. If Rod Ferguson just kept his mouth shut.
opposite side of the world.
Yeah, literally about as far as you can go.
I think we needed an artist, and we knew no one who's ever drawn anything in their lives. And Eric is an accomplished artist and has done a whole industrial design thing. He wrote a textbook that many universities use. Like he's up there. And so I said to him, where would we find a lead artist? And he looked at plane tickets.
The Trinity was formed. Chris Wilson with his vision for the next great ARPG.
Oh, wait a minute. This dude's clearly high. This dude is 100% baked. Look at him. Come on now. Don't lie. You know, this guy's serious. This dude's ready to go. Jonathan looks like he's about to pop a fedora and go, "Milady." I'm sorry, dude. The internet has ruined me, man. And this guy's baked 100%.
Trinity was formed. Chris Wilson with his vision for the next great ARPG to fill the gap they saw in the market and scratch that eternal Diablo 2 itch. Jonathan Rogers, who knew from a very young age that he wanted nothing more than to make video games and was completely on board with the project. And last but not least, Eric Olofsson, the man behind the art and aesthetic of the game. Now what they needed was funding to make this vision a reality. Unfortunately, at the time in New Zealand, the games industry was still very underdeveloped, making investors and funding difficult to obtain.
We're lucky to have rich friends, so they've been willing to invest some money in the project to see it to fruition. It's very difficult to get venture capitalists or angel investors interested, especially in online games. There's a mixture of fear and misunderstanding in the industry.
That's where their fourth co-founder came in. That rich friend was none other than Brian Weissman. Weissman lives in the United States, and he privately funded the project's early development as its executive producer, believing in the vision that Chris Wilson and the others had brought forth. Brian was a pro Magic the Gathering player from 1994 to 1999. For all you MTG fans out there, he invented the most well-known control deck in all of Magic history, simply known as the deck.
Disenchant, Swords to Plowshare, Sarah Angel. It's got white characters on there. Mana Drain, Counterspell, of course. Only 2 counterspells? Red Elemental Blast. Yeah, I don't know a lot of these cards. But wait, he's also got red cards on there. Wait, is it? It's got all colors. Because, like, Regrowth is a green card. My man's got all colors in this deck. What the hell? That's crazy.
I met Brian in the early 2000s because we both played online role-playing games, and at the time we were playing a game called Diablo 2, a very formal...
This is the room before Bale, right? Yeah, this is a Bale run, if I remember correctly. Oh, on held difficulty. Nice. And he is playing a Necro with a Iron Golem, 12 skeletons, 8 revives. Yep, you needed those revives. Wait, how's he using skeletons? This must have been long after I played the game. Because back when I played the game, skeletons fucking sucked. Skeletons were actually worthless once you got to Nightmare. Skeletons would get one tap by literally everything, even if you fully invested into like Skeleton Mastery and all that stuff, because they didn't used to have synergies back then. Oh, I mean... Poison is marked in green, so this is already way after I stopped playing the game. Because back when I played the game, immune to poison would just be white text. It wouldn't even be green. So yeah, this is old footage, but not as old as when I played it. It's interesting.
Formative game, and that resulted in a close friendship which has endured to this day.
And one interesting thing kept reappearing in our conversations over and over again. Could we, in fact, make a game that would be a worthy sequel to Diablo 2? Crazy idea.
Chris Wilson has an absolutely insane Magic collection, and I'll have a video linked in the description for those interested. In the video, he shows off some of this collection of his, which contains some of the craziest Magic the Gathering misprints that I've ever seen. In late 2006, early 2007, the trio used Chris's garage as an office space. The first year, the guys did nothing but talk about the project and played games for further research, in an attempt to dissect what made different games so compelling, as well as meticulously going over the details of their company and laying out the foundations for their game.
Back in the...
A very important thing. I want you to pay attention to what they say here.
In an attempt to dissect what made...
a little bit further
and I'll
back.
have a video linked. Some of the craziest Magic the Gathering used Chris's garage as an office space. The first year, the guys did nothing but talk about the project and played games for further research.
The first year, for a full year, they did nothing but play video games for research. That's why they know what to do. Nowadays, you can't just spend a whole year playing video games. As a matter of fact, a lot of developers just straight up don't even play video games. There's a lot of developers that are in the gaming industry right now that don't play video games, and that's the problem. That's why their games suck, because they don't fucking play them. Because if they did play them, they would understand, oh, that's why this sucks. That's why there's this problem here. You know, like if they, for instance, if the people who worked on Veilguard actually played the story of Veilguard, they would be like, oh, that's why the story sucks. These characters have no fucking chemistry whatsoever. No wonder this fucking sucks. Duh, who wrote this? There you go. But they didn't, so they didn't know. That's the problem.
In an attempt to dissect what made different games so compelling, as well as meticulously going over the details of their company and laying out the foundations for their game.
Back in the mid-2000s, my co-founders and I had played a ton of Diablo 2. Like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours.
Dude. So, obviously, Diablo 2 is, you know, in full highlight here. Diablo 2, also one of my favorite games of all times, 100%. But Dungeon Siege is another game that I played a lot. I used to play Dungeon Siege a lot with friends. It was a super fun game. This was made by Microsoft, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Microsoft says right here. And another game that I remember playing quite a bit as well was Hellgate London. I don't remember a whole lot about this game, but I remember I liked it a lot as well. I played this with friends too. Titan Quest, I played with a friend of mine once. We had like a multiplayer session, and I hated it because my friend was playing a Dreamweaver, and I wanted to play like a fire-based character, and the fire-based character did no damage, and the Dreamweaver was cleaning the screen the whole time, and I was like, this sucks. I hate this game. And obviously everybody knows Torchlight. Played a bunch of Torchlight as well. So yeah, I pretty much played all the games in here, and yeah, makes perfect sense.
And as we, over time, tired of the game, we looked at other action RPGs that we wanted to try out. You know, we tried out Dungeon Siege series and Titan Quest and so on. And we played those games too and enjoyed them, but only for dozens of hours rather than thousands of hours.
Yeah.
And so this caused us to ask, why did we sink so much more time into Diablo 2? What was perfect? What made that game the best action RPG that had ever existed? And so we came up with a bunch of design pillars that we feel a perfect action RPG needs that some of the other games hadn't quite hit in all cases.
Those design pillars are still used by grinding gear games today, albeit a bit more refined and expanded upon. They're unpaid
visceral action combat, randomly generated levels, randomly generated items, secure online economy. Yep, BattleNet, which by the way wasn't really that secure. It got hacked, and it kind of sucked. There was a bunch of duped items because I used to play a lot back in the day. So there were a bunch of problems with BattleNet, and people were able to, you know, dupe items and do all kinds of like nasty shenanigans. And it was actually a very interesting thing, which you guys might not be aware of this, but at one point there was a friend of mine who I got into the game. And this friend of mine, because he enjoyed the game so much, with his first character, he was like, listen, I like this game so much, I want to give you my imbues. So I was mostly playing barbarians. That would be what I would always play. And that was a very well-known duped sword, which was an executioner sword. It was somebody had imbued that one at some point. It had the highest damage in the game, this executioner sword. And so I went ahead and I grabbed 3 white executioner swords and I gave it to my friend, and he used this 3 imbues for me. The first 2 imbues were trash, but the final imbue made an executioner sword that dealt more damage than the duped executioner sword, which was like the most powerful executioner sword in the game. So for a while, I had the highest damage executioner sword in Europe. Okay? Which is pretty friggin' cool. But it had a downside. And if you were playing Diablo 2 back then, you might remember, because I think at one point I showed the sword to somebody and they were able to like dupe it. And then my executioner sword became the big duped sword that everybody was using. But if you've ever played Diablo 2 back then in the European servers, you might have run across this executioner sword. The one downside that it had is that it had hit causes monsters to flee. Which sucked, because you would use that sword as a whirlwind barbarian, which is what most people were playing, right? And so you're trying to whirlwind, and all the monsters are running away from you. So my solution to that problem was I used an ice blink, which was this unique, I think it was a unique chainmail. And what that did is hit causes monsters to freeze. So I'd freeze them, and then they wouldn't be able to run away, and then I would murder them with whirlwind. But yeah, and then deep character customization, obviously with the skill tree that you had, as well as the stats that you would have in Diablo 2.
Research and development time that first year was well spent. Brian Weissman's funding aided in their ability to hire salaried workers and contractors, as well as rent out actual office space as the team grew. Their vision was starting to become a reality. And after much debate, the co-founders had finally decided on a company name, Grinding Gear Games. The name had a hidden double meaning which they thought was clever, and it fit perfectly. Grinding Gear Games stood for both the visual representation of the gears grinding together as shown in their logo, but the name also exhibits the core gameplay loop of Path of Exile, which has you grinding for the best gear you can acquire. The small GGG team worked in secret for the next several years, not even publicizing the fact that they were making a game, not until what they had was ready to blow people's minds. In 2010, with Diablo 3 now announced and set to release in 2012, Chris and the team knew it was now or never to build hype for their game. The project was originally going to be called One With Nothing, a name which was scrapped in favor of the more epic title, Path of Exile. It was speculated that the name Path of Exile was inspired by this D2 expansion set, Lord of Destruction.
So spoke the wanderer, mindful of hardships and cruel slaughter. Each dawn I rise alone, mired in ancient sorrows, wretched and deprived of my native land. I've had my mind bound with fettered. For many years I lay hidden in the concealment of the earth, buried deep in stone. From there I went, abject and winter grieving over the surface of the waves. I sought the prison of my noble kinsman. Sorrow is a cruel companion to one who can afford a few friends, and the path of exile attends this mournful spirit. Interesting. I didn't know about that.
And so, in September of 2010, they flew to the US to show the world what they had been working on.
Man, that looks a little bit rough. Here's a funny thing, though. I rarely see people engaging in multiplayer in Path of Exile. Is that just me? Do you guys often see other streamers playing, like, in co-op? Usually most of the streamers that I see playing this game, everybody's playing solo, right?
Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile were completely unknown at the time, but the announcement of their game was a success. It was unique, and although not perfect, the game was well polished for its stage of development, and scratched that Diablo 2 itch for many players. Path of Exile received coverage in major publications at the time, including PC Gamer, Inc. Gamers, IGN, and more. Alpha and closed beta for the game ran from 2010 to 2013, and the team had scaled up from the original 3 all the way to 18 employees and contractors, looking to see the project through. The open beta was launched and the team was on top of the world. Things were going well for the indie developer, very well, achieving a peak of 70,000 concurrent users and nearly 2 million signups. Their initial growth was spectacular, but maintaining those players was the issue. As their small weekly patches shifted to large quarterly updates, they started to see a rise in returning and new players. These large content updates became known as challenge leagues, which would reset the economy and bring forth a ton of new content. Leagues and expansions allowed for both experimentation for future game mechanics.
This is something that Diablo 2 is also doing. They were also like resetting the ladder every couple of months or something to keep things fresh. And if you wanted to play the ladder, you would have to make a brand new character whenever the new seasons came along.
And also did its job in bringing players back fairly consistently every update. On October 23rd, 2013, Path of Exile was officially released.
They named me Sinner. They stripped me of my life.
No pants guy. Look at the no pants guy.
But this land was a wealthy land.
Thank God the characters have pants now.
Plentiful as bones.
Biggest upgrade.
There is a life here, if I have the will to take it. I will take from others. I will use others to take from this world. Or I will fight alone. I am an exile, condemned to live in fear.
I love the unapologetic themes.
If I am to survive, I must do but one thing. Conquer the beast within.
Grinding Gear Games had learned a lot of lessons through Alpha and Beta, and they had their fair share of ups and downs over the years to follow 1.0, but they've never lost sight of their original vision and have always remained authentic and transparent. Both the team size and the content additions to the game have scaled up tremendously as the game has grown over the years. Let's go over the 3 things that I think have allowed Path of Exile and Grinding Gear Games to not only survive, but thrive.
I think one of the important things that I've also noticed from Path of Exile, from stuff that I've seen in the past, is the fact that they don't necessarily want you to just keep playing the game forever. They're like, it's perfectly fine. Play the game, take a break, come back for a league, play it again, take a break, skip a league if you don't feel like it, come back for the next one. And it doesn't seem like they try too hard to force players to come back to play the game, which I think is a smart thing. But this is the vibe that I get from what I've heard from people. Again, because I wasn't playing it, so I don't have the full picture. But I seem to remember, even, wasn't it during the release of Elden Ring that they pushed it back, or the release of another big game that came out, and they were like, oh, we're actually going to push back this league because another game's releasing. And they were just like, oh, we're gonna push this back because we know you guys want to play this other game, so go play the other game and then come back when you're done with the other game. We'll have the league ready for you. They're conscious that people also have lives. Exactly. And I think that's a very smart move to make. Like, don't make your players feel like they're always missing out. And I think that is a much healthier attitude to have.
There are many more factors than the 3 that I'll be going over here, but I'm going to list off the top 3 things that I think have allowed the game to grow relatively consistently year over year. First up has to be their free-to-play business model. In 2006, when they were first laying out their foundational principles in Chris Wilson's garage, this one was near the top of their list. At the time of Path of Exile's inception, they would have been one of the first free-to-play Western games on the market.
And you're using your own technology for the engine, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Right.
It was written entirely in-house.
Why'd you do that?
It was cheaper. I mean, we funded the game based on our savings and, the savings of friends and family and stuff. So we had to take cheap, smart options rather than buying tools because we just couldn't afford them.
Economical?
Yes, indeed. Well, where possible, we'll try to think of a way which saves us money to solve a problem.
Got it. And so why free to play in that case? Following up.
When we started the project in 2006, there weren't any Western free games. It was popular in Asian markets. Games like Maple Story were doing really well. Mm-hmm. So we had this plan to be the first free-to-play game in Western markets. Then it took 6 years to make the game. So we were not the first. And since then, the term free-to-play has become poisoned a bit by games that sell advantage and experience potions and a ton of convenience options.
This is one of the biggest things, dude. This is one of the biggest things that I like about this game, is that they don't fucking sell you advantages. Yes, they sell you the stash tabs, and yes, you can make the arguments like, oh, you need the premium stash tabs for trading and all of that. Yes, but it is not as egregious as straight up selling you gear. I have a serious problem with games that sell you gear. And I know that a lot of people disagree with me on that, and all of that is like, look, I don't care how much of the grind you're saving, is like, I don't like it.
Options, which are almost cheating, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
So we've been very clear that while our game is free, we don't sell advantage in that way. And so this is something our fans actually really appreciate.
Ethical microtransactions.
That's right, yes.
They knew that their monetization model would prove effective, but they were completely unaware at just how effective. It all started out as a crowdfunding program on their website. As funding grew thin for their beta development, they looked to the success of Kickstarter campaigns for other games. Kickstarter was riddled with fees that they didn't want to pay, so they decided to run their own variation of crowdfunding containing different backer tiers on their official Path of Exile website. The $10 tier contained a closed beta key, and the higher up you went, the more rewards you would receive. No pay to win, ever. The company raised over $2.5 million during this campaign, the early stages of what would later become supporter packs. These packs would contain physical items from the developers, such as t-shirts, mouse pads, decor, art, and otherwise. They would also contain some pretty exclusive and amazing in-game cosmetics. To add on to that, you would receive the monetary value of that supporter pack as store points to spend on anything of your choosing. For instance, a $100 supporter pack contains all of the merchant cosmetics that are listed, as well as 1,000 in-game store points, which is the equivalent of the $100 that you just spent. They try very hard to cram value into these packs, and they seem to get better every year. By allowing everyone to try your full game out for free, those that stick around and receive hundreds of hours of enjoyment out of the game actually want to help with the funding of continued development. It's a direct...
Like the case for me, right? I bought into the $30 pack when, you know, because I wanted to play Path of Exile 2 on early access release. So I bought the $30 pack, and since then I've upgraded to the $100 pack because I'm just like, do I really care that much about the rewards of the $100 pack? No. I mean, I do like the hideout, the moving hideout. I kind of dig that a lot. Is that worth $100? Fuck no. But that's like the only thing that I actually kind of care about the whole thing. But it's mostly like, yeah, I want to support them. Yeah, sure. Have 100 bones. I mean, I've played over 120 hours at this point. Fuck yeah, you deserve over $100 for this amazing game.
Incentive, especially when the content updates have done nothing but increase in size and quality over the years. This free-to-play model that they've kept the entire time has been pivotal to Grinding Gear Games' success in my eyes. Zero barrier to entry. The second success factor would have to be their leagues and overall content release cadence. Chris Wilson likes to attribute the realization of this lesson to his now good friend and infamous gamer, Kripparrian.
What?
The final story is one that I did not realize myself. I wish I was smart enough to think of this, but this actually came from Kripparrian, the awesome streamer who played a lot of Path of Exile at the time. Enough to think of this. The final story is one that I did not realize myself. I wish I was smart enough to think of this, but this actually came from Kripparrian, the awesome streamer who played a lot of Path of Exile at the time. And so Kripparrian and I were chatting on Skype, as I like to say that we did occasionally. And he said to me, you know what, Chris, I've got a lesson for you that really helped me with my streaming. He said, every day I will wake up and I'll stream at a reliable time. I'm there right at that moment. And I'm going to stream until a predictable time. And then I'm going to work on my highlights video and I'm going to post that at a predictable time. And then I'm back tomorrow doing exactly the same thing. And I'm going to try not to take days off. I'm just going to stream at these times. And the reason he explained was because that way, when someone comes home from work and they're wanting to watch Kripparrian, if that's the time of day that he's streaming, then they'll be able to watch him. And if they want to watch a video before they go to bed or whatever the timing is, it will be there. And the day that it's not there is the day they look on the internet and say, what will entertain me? What else is there in the world? And they'll find some other thing, maybe another streamer, maybe a TV show. And now that's the thing they're doing for entertainment. And he felt that his numbers dropped significantly if he deviated from his very rigid schedule. Now, you know, he's a powerhouse.
And this, by the way, is absolutely correct. And Kripparrian being a content creator, he knows exactly all about that. And this is one of the reasons why the algorithm is so incredibly punishing and why streamers basically don't take that many breaks. Like I said in my QA video, I've taken no breaks this year. No breaks whatsoever. From the beginning of the year until now. It's just like nose to the grindstone nonstop. Now, I'm not as consistent as Kripparrian, because I think I'm older than Kripparrian, and on top of it, I have kids, so it makes it very hard to be that consistent. But I instantly notice the moment that I lose even a little bit of consistency, the numbers instantly go down. It fucking sucks. So like I can make a really banger video that takes a little bit longer to produce, and I'm basically fucking myself. Yeah, the algorithms nowadays are very, very, very hard.
Of streaming, right? He's amazing. And he recommended that we do a similar schedule with Path of Exile because he said, look at your graph of what you've actually done in 2014. I made this graph, not him, but it was all over the place, right? We've got medium leagues at 20 weeks, big ones at 16. They arbitrarily get small and close together. No Path of Exile player is going to think anything other than, is that game dying? Like, what's going on with them getting smaller, and what's with the timing? No one can predict anything. And so he strongly suggested we have a rigid schedule because that way, It's more convenient for him because then he knows when to stream it, but it's also convenient for everyone else. And so we tried this out.
Self-serving Kripparrian.
So this was our new schedule, the new era of leagues, as it's called. And so they're every 13 weeks. So this means exactly 4 of them fit into a year. That means that we know that they're going to be on the second weekend of the final month in each quarter or whatever we do. And this perfectly fits having one a few weeks before Christmas and a week before GDC and a week before E3. It just matches everything, and it's great. So we started doing this, and we were initially doing some pipelining. We work on a small one while working on a bigger one in the background. And then in the second part of the cycle, we release the big one and then repeat this. And that enabled us to experiment with scope and so on, because at this point, we still weren't 100% sure how large these had to be to have the correct effect. We were pretty sure 13 weeks, which is roughly 3 months, was the right amount of time.
During this game development conference talk, Chris continues to explain how players quitting your game is inevitable. Their goal was to ensure that with this new content release cycle and predictable schedule, that the players that did stop playing for whatever the reason may be, would have a plan to return for the following league, and that they would know reliably when the following league would be released. This content cycle has been working out very well for both GGG and the players ever since.
And so when you look at it in the context of all of the Path of Exile history, you can see that we were clearly declining. There's no argument about that for the first few years.
So Kripparrian is basically responsible for a big part of Path of Exile's success. It's very interesting.
Years, and then really clearly climbing.
They were clearly climbing indeed, and with their latest patch 3.25, Settlers of Kalgur, which was released on July 26th of this year, they continued that same growth trend. On the same day as the release of 3.25, the game exceeded its all-time peak on Steam with over 229,000 players online concurrently. And what some people neglect to remember is that Path of Exile has its own standalone client as well. And as long as they keep the quality and cadence consistent, I don't see that stopping anytime soon. My third and final, arguably most important factor is the community that they've built. The game was in development for over 7 years. For at least 4 of those, Grinding Gear Games did no press or announcements for their game. No one knew about them or the game that they were creating. From the time Path of Exile was announced in 2010, Chris Wilson was extremely active on their website's forums. He made weekly dev blogs on their YouTube channel to update everyone on their development, and he was constantly involved on Reddit. Not only did this allow him to quite literally shape the community and keep the messaging of his company and game authentic, it was something the fans of the game really appreciated, and Chris really enjoyed it too. Between constant news updates, announcements, and otherwise, Chris earned the trust and respect of the players. And in 2014, Chris said if they raised over $25,000 for the Child's Play charity, that he would shave his head for the community. They did just that, and it was time for him to ascend to his true form.
Hey, I'm Chris Wilson from Grinding Gear Games. Over the last couple of weeks, we raised over $25,000 for the Child's Play charity, and I promised I'd shave my head if we reached 25k, so let's go find a hairdresser, I guess.
Time to shave that bald head.
Yeah.
Wait, it's not that far.
This one looks good.
They're right next to a hairdresser. Bro! What the hell?
Yep.
Oh my god! What a Chad!
This is simulating balding pretty well, right there. Looks good.
There you go.
I like it.
It does look good.
You know, after watching Fight Club, the one thing that I wanted to get from this clip was her just like slapping him in the back of the head. You guys have watched that scene where they're just like shaving everybody's head in Fight Club, and then Brad Pitt goes behind one of them, ready to be shot out into space. Space monkey.
Yeah. Well done. Good on you.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
All right. How to paste the music back at the office.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
You got to film that part too.
Yeah, I'll get the reaction.
There you go. And then just go right back to work.
All right. We have to get some reactions now. Oh, you got it. It's pretty cold out there. It's like 10 degrees. Need some cold resist.
That same year, he also did the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
ALS is a horribly crippling disease, and it's a really serious business. I know it's funny to watch videos of people getting wet on YouTube, but you should seriously consider donating to the cause. I've put $100 in, and hopefully you guys do as well. I'd like to nominate 3 people. First person is Max Schaefer from Runic Games. The second one is Mike Diskett from 5 Live Studios. And finally, Sean from Bro Team Pill. Okay, well, we've got this nice and cold for quite a while now, so hit me, guys. Okay. I need more cold resist.
The game was really solidifying itself in the market, and the team was earning respect and admiration across the board. Chris and the team at Grinding Gear Games have not only built a fantastic game, they've handcrafted and curated an amazing community of fans. Fans that will follow them and support them until the end. There are a million more factors I could mention, such as their highly unique and versatile skill system, their passive tree, whether that terrifies or delights you, maps, items, and all of their meta systems. And way more that I could list off and talk about, but I wanted to keep the length of this video relatively reasonable. I'd love to hear about what your favorite thing about Path of Exile is, and what keeps you coming back every league. If you'd be so kind to let me know down in the comments. Now let's wrap up this video and take a look at how Grinding Gear Games plan to carry forward this recipe for success in Path of Exile 2. Originally announced at ExileCon in 2019, Path of Exile 2 was meant to be a major content update to the original game. It was going to be the 4.0 patch.
And we're really proud to finally reveal Path of Exile 4.0.
The gods are dead.
I think making it a different game was a good decision.
Men will always seek to take their place.
Criminals! Your sentence is to be hanged from the neck until dead. Let your souls feed the first ones, and your bodies feed the land.
The only result is pain and death.
The demon is escaping! Kill her!
Get her.
Dude, look at those visuals.
This vision has changed a bit since then. Here's a portion of the keynote from ExileCon 2023.
When we announced Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon 2019, we told you guys that we were releasing it as an expansion to PoE 1 and that both campaigns would be playable on the same game client with a shared endgame. But PoE 2's scope has continued to grow and grow, and it's far more than just an expansion with a new campaign. It has entirely new monsters, skills, mechanics, classes, everything you'd expect from the next generation of action RPGs. Not to mention revamps of most of the PoE 1 League content. This thing is just freaking huge. There was a point when we realized that our plan to replace PoE 1 with PoE 2 would essentially be getting rid of a game that people love for no real reason. So we made a decision. Path of Exile 1 and 2 will be separate with their own mechanics, balance, endgames, and leagues. But it's
I think that this was 100% the right decision, because I don't know if I would be as interested in the next Path of Exile if it was still kind of like linked to Path of Exile 1. That's not to say Path of Exile 1 is bad, quite the opposite. I think Path of Exile 1 is awesome, but I think it's a very prohibitive game to jump into at this point, because once a game runs for a certain period of time, it becomes very prohibitive to jump back in. Like a good example of this would be World of Warcraft. I think very few people are trying to jump into retail World of Warcraft nowadays. I think it's very hard to wrap your head around like all of the systems, like, oh, the Great Vault, the way the Mythic Plus works, the raid and the scheduling and all. It's like, bro, most of the people playing World of Warcraft have to be 40 by now. There's very few people playing World of Warcraft under the age of 40, I would imagine. So yeah.
still a shared platform. Your microtransactions are available across both games.
That's
Everything
another
you've ever
thing.
purchased or will ever purchase in the future.
That's the other thing. Like, imagine just being like, oh yeah, everything you've ever purchased comes with you into the new game. That's crazy. That's insane. I don't know a lot of other companies that would dare to do that.
Future will be usable in both games unless it's hyper-specific to the content of one of them. You can't transform into a bear in PoE 1, so a reskin of your bear form isn't going to work. But you absolutely can equip the awesome armor set that you got and use all your stash tabs.
The separation wasn't well received initially after the announcement, but it truly was the right path forward. It removed any shackles that the original game would have placed on the design of Path of Exile 2. And both games will receive content updates that offset each other, so that you can constantly play Path of Exile 1 and then back to Path of Exile 2. Rinse and repeat. For those of you unsure who Mark Roberts, the man standing next to Jonathan, is, he's affectionately referred to as Mark II, since he was the second Mark to join the company. But most everyone else calls him Neon, and he's an absolute badass with an encyclopedic knowledge of the game. He competed in race events and on the ladder for fun. He plays the game a lot and really knows his shit. Starting out as a simple QA tester on Path of Exile, Neon has proved himself an invaluable asset to the team, and I couldn't be happier that him and Jonathan are heading up this sequel project. I have to say, from the footage I've seen the past few years, Path of Exile 2 looks absolutely spectacular. As an avid MMO player, the WASD movement has me very excited, and just everything about the game seems so well thought out and polished. You can really see how much Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile has evolved over the years. Path of Exile 2 is their opportunity to truly bring their new tech and all of those lessons learned forward, with early access open for everyone beginning in November of this year, barring any issues. When comparing Path of Exile 2 to other games on the market, I, like many others, find myself asking, how on earth is this game free?
Yep. How is this game free? That's crazy.
Grinding Gear Games has achieved the impossible. Their continued growth can be attributed to a lot of strategy and luck, but the amount of hard work and passion that has been poured into this company and game cannot be understated. I personally began playing in Breach League myself and have returned off and on ever since. I absolutely can't wait for Path of Exile 2, and I'll definitely be covering it and maybe even the lore on this channel come November. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, for those that made it this far into the video, I have a question for you, and I'll respond to everyone that takes the time to comment their thoughts. What feature in Path of Exile 2 has you most excited? For me, it has to be the silky smooth WASD movement that I mentioned earlier. Putting that in an already epic ARPG, I absolutely can't wait. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel if you're looking forward to more reviews, documentaries, and lore out of me, and I'll see you all in the next one. Farewell.
Make sure to go and like this video. This is an awesome video. Fantastic work. And it gave us a window into the development team, Grinding Gear Games, which is something that I was curious about. And yeah, I do think that this is slowly becoming one of my, going up there with some of my favorite development studios right now, where you would obviously have people like From Software, the Monster Hunter team, friggin' Larian Studios. I just think that these guys are doing fantastic work, and I think the Path of Exile 2 is absolutely phenomenal, and I'm super excited to see what they have in store. Now,